Hello, Professor Moon.
Hello, Counselor Joseph.
Today we are exploring the Netflix series Teach You a Lesson, Episode 3, about the teen influencer named Han Yeri. Teachers like Chun Sun-young and Go Young-soo at Soyeon Girls' School are suffering under Han Yeri's false accusations. Dr. Moon, what thoughts came to mind as you watched this episode?
I enjoyed watching this episode from the angles of Hallyu in Korea's context. Episode 3 is a snapshot or microcosm of the global advancement of K-culture and K-pop via social media like YouTube and Instagram. Hanyeri, a high school student at Soyeon Yogo, which is girls' high school, is a very popular social influencer, and she uses her fame to boost her self-esteem via these channels. She does not hesitate at all to use her social media for her interests. Two main teachers, Ko Young-soo and Jung Sun-young, feel helpless about the negative side of social media that harms teachers. Even Mr. Ko died by suicide. It's interesting to see both the positive and negative sides of K-pop culture. From an educational perspective, cyberbullying is a key theme of this episode with huge concerns and negative impact of social media. In a best-selling book entitled Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt emphasizes social illness such as depression and anxiety in young generations like Generation Alpha. These digital natives with smartphones are exposed to anxiety, and Haidt takes action not to use technology like smartphones until high school. Teachers Chung Sun-young and Ko Young-soo are the victims of cyberbullying by Han Ye-ri and her followers and feel isolated and helpless throughout the episode until Teachers' Rights Protection Agency intervenes. So, Counselor Joseph, what about you as you watch this episode? What stood out to you?
Yeah, we received glimpses of Han Yeri's backstory throughout the series. Something occurred during her middle school years that shattered her faith in most, if not all, adults. Her behavior closely mirrors oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. While she is a fictional character and cannot be clinically diagnosed, her symptomology aligns with all four diagnostic criteria for the disorder. 1. Intense and compulsive anger. 2. Frequent arguments with authority figures and deliberate rule breaking. 3. Vindictiveness, perhaps her most prominent hallmark sign, driven by an intense desire for revenge against those she feels have wronged her and those who resemble those who have wronged her. 4. Duration. The behavioral symptoms must persist beyond the required 6-month threshold, and almost every day. And Hanyeri definitely exhibits all four criteria. Clinically speaking, slapping an ODD label on Hanyeri and forcing her into therapy or behavioral treatments would be an uphill battle, likely providing her with only more adults to hate and rebel against. In reality, ODD is a multifaceted diagnosis. Clinicians must account for diverse etiological roots of the condition, as treatment strategies vary depending on the underlying sources. Research indicates biological and neurological components to ODD, pointing to specific brain structures and chemical imbalances that may necessitate psychiatric interventions to modulate serotonin and dopamine levels. Additionally, genetic factors can play a role, which would point toward a need for behavioral modifications, clear directives, and consistent structure. Final facet of ODD involves adverse experiences or trauma. In Hanyeri's case, trauma appears to have preceded her ODD symptoms. In fact, her vindictive cyberbullying functions largely as a trauma response. Professor Moon, what are some new ways the educational system is dealing with cyberbullying and bullying in general? Are there any systemic changes that can make a difference?
Well, that's a great question. Educators may analyze cyberbullying in this episode in multiple directions too. Well, I'm a Korean who grew up in Korea for more than 3 decades and immigrated to the States. I interpret this episode from the culture of save face, which is 체면 살리기 in Korean. The culture of saving face is partially related to social identities among Koreans, whose individual identities are heavily constructed by the communities they belong to, such as families, schools, or organizations. Identity is both a self identification of who you are. In Korean, you will notice weird expressions of our wife, 우리 아내, our house, 우리 집, not my wife or my house. Technically, you do not share your wife or your home with other people. This is an indicator of whether a speaker is a native speaker or a non-native Korean speaker when using 우리 집 or 내 집, because Koreans do not say 내 집. The former is natural like an idiom, and the latter is grammatically incorrect, paradoxically. Although Korean society is dramatically changing to dissociate its identities from associate groups, this culture still remains. I still sense that these social, political, and cultural identity constructions shape some directions in this episode. In particular, I was saddened to watch the decision that Mr. Ko made after Han-Yeri wrongly accused him of sexual assault after having a one-on-one meeting about her wrongdoing against the teacher Jung. Some viewers may already know that all episodes in Teach Your Lesson are motivated by true stories in Korea. Episode 3 is based on a true story that a middle school teacher committed suicide due to an allegation of sexual assault, which turned out not to be true in 2017. In K-dramas, viewers frequently encounter scenes in which main characters contemplate or attempt suicide when they face overwhelming difficulties. It is problematic to generalize the causes of suicides based on the highest suicide rate among OECD countries. Korea's big task and health policy have been working on how to address both cultural and psychological issues of offering adequate support for social depression and the culture of saving face. So statistically, according to the National Mental Health and Welfare Commission on March 25th, 2026 in Korea, the suicide rate is 29.1 per 100,000 people. The
Wow.
concerns are about suicides among students and socially and economically marginalized groups. Han-Yeri's homeroom teacher, Mr. Ko Young-soo, was accused of sexual assault, as we know, and he committed suicide. And I analyzed social depression in Korean society given its culture of rapid change and speed of collaboration. It's like running a treadmill at 10 miles per hour, whereas regular people can run
Right.
only 5 miles per hour. Social media exacerbated the speed of responding to problems or harms. So at this point, Counselor Joseph, can you talk about how suicidality is dealt with in counseling?
Yeah, suicidality is a critical public health concern both globally and in the US. According to the CDC, the US suicide rate stands at 13.7 deaths per 100,000 people. Although lower than South Korea's alarming rate of 29.1, this still translates to 48,824 deaths in
Wow, it's a lot.
2024. That is a lot, yeah.
Hmm.
In that same year, an estimated 14.3 million adults experienced serious suicidal ideation, and 4.6 million people made a suicide plan, and 2.2 million people attempted suicide. Individuals experiencing general inferential confusion, passing thoughts, or an abstract fear of suicide are excluded from these counts, as such thoughts are nearly universal among adults. In fact, a fear of death, whether by suicide or other means, functions as an innate protective factor. Now, let's talk about the theoretical frameworks of suicide. Several primary theories attempt to explain the psychological and sociological underpinnings of suicide. Thomas Joyner's interpersonal theory of suicide proposes that suicide emerges from the convergence of three components. One, perceived burdensomeness, the entrenched cognition of being a burden to others. Two, thwarted belongingness, a deep sense of loneliness and a lack of meaningful connection. Three, acquired capability, the habituation to pain and fear that enables an individual to act. According to this theory, treatment of suicidality will work to assuage one or more components. Edwin Schneiderman's concepts of psychache is another. From a purely psychological perspective, Schneidman argued that suicidality is an attempt to escape unbearable psychological pain rather than an inherent wish to die. It is a desperate mechanism to halt an intolerable mental state. Emil Durkheim's sociological perspective emphasized that suicide rates are heavily influenced by social structures, categorizing suicide into four distinct types based on social integration and regulation. First, egoistic, characterized by profound social isolation and low integration. Two, altruistic, driven by over identification with a group or cause, leading to self sacrifice. Three, anomic, triggered by social, moral, or economic upheaval. And four, fatalistic, stemming from oppressive societal control that obliterates personal freedom. Regardless of the theoretical lens, one truth remains: humans fundamentally value life. This
That's
is
right.
why, yeah, this is why a fear of death exists in the first place, and why we instinctively reach for a band aid, even over a smallest cut. This is where dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, proves highly effective for individuals experiencing suicidality and self harm. The word dialectical refers to the coexistence of two opposing ideas in the same mind. Specifically, the internal conflict of I want to die versus I want to live. This duality mirrors the architecture of the brain. The left hemisphere typically governs logic, rationale, and language, while the right hemisphere manages instincts, emotions, and imagination. Logically, a person does not want to die. Rather, they use their imagination to conceptualize an escape from pain. If the teacher, Mr. Go Young-soo, were to undergo DBT, he would master four core modules: distress tolerance, emotional regulation, mindfulness, and interpersonal effectiveness. In practice, Mr. Ko would learn to hold two conflicting thoughts simultaneously, such as I am loved by many and I'm a burden to others. The intense distress of cyberbullying would become manageable, and his overwhelming shame, sadness, and anxiety would be regulated. Mindfulness would help him recognize the distortion in his emotional thinking. While Mr. Cole worries he is a burden, humans are inherently burdensome. In other words, all babies are as burdensome as Mr. Cole.
That's
At certain
interesting.
and at certain points, all humans rely on others. Yet we use different words for this: care and love. People deeply want to care for and love Mr. Ko through turbulent times. Through the mastery of mindfulness, distress tolerance, and emotional regulation, DBT naturally improves interpersonal relationships, helping individuals feel significantly less isolated. Suicidality is ultimately one of the most treatable psychological crises. Even within severe depression, where baseline suicide rates are high, 2023 study by Kern and others illustrates a clear, hopeful picture. The study highlights that while lifetime suicide risks range from 1% for general mood disorders and up to 13% for patients with severe depression, now, effective treatment drastically reduces this rate to roughly 0.14% per 100 person years for outpatients with even treatment resistant depression. The numbers speak for themselves. Interventions bridges the gap from 13% down to 0.14%.
It's
When
amazing.
it comes to suicidality, getting help is paramount. We now have an easy to remember hotline for suicide prevention, and the number is 988. So please get help when you are in need. Professor Moon, did you notice anything else about the teachers?
I noticed the dilemmas of public school teachers in Korea in their teaching. Korea's education, as apparent in this Netflix series, has many components to revisit and reshape. One outstanding ongoing issue is the fall of public education, which is 공교육 분괴, literally meaning that students learn curriculum content in language, art, math, and other core subjects via shadow education like 학원 and private tutoring. In this episode, viewers may be curious why high school students don't pay attention at school. What we saw in the drama was an explicit message that students are not focusing on learning while using smartphones during the class. Only a few students in the front row in particular follow teacher Chung's teaching. You notice that students keep a real phone and a fake phone to be prepared for a no smartphone policy in Korean schools. So, for example, when Im Halim, one of the agents in 교권국, collects all smartphones, most students submit a fake phone and still keep their real smartphones. A cultural component of 공교육 붕괴, which is the fall of public education, originates from the social realities that students learn the same curriculum in advance, usually 1 to 3 or 5 years ahead of standard grade level in reading and math, to prepare for Korea's SAT, which is 수능, 수학능력시험. Public school teachers mostly teach content that is way beyond the students' actual understanding of the curriculum. Teachers feel helpless or frustrated when students have no motivation to learn in their classrooms. Most middle-class students study through shadow education during out-of-school time and take a break during regular school hours like sleeping, using smartphones, or chatting with peers. This attitude of no respect for public school teachers is quite different from the stereotypical images of Korean culture that students respect teachers based on Confucianism. In some cases, it is, yet from the structural issue of Korean education, students do not value studying during regular school hours in that they have the better teacher at Hagwon with small class sizes and individualized instruction or private tutoring based on their content understanding of the concepts. Due to hyper competition, standardized tests like Korea's SAT get more credit than high school GPAs. Universities implement multiple tracks to enter college, such as statements of purpose, school records, or resumes. Students still get into major universities solely by SAT. So smart students like Hetty have the option to destroy the learning atmosphere in her class. So if you watch the later episodes, you learn that Hetty was supposed to enter Chungmyeong 외국어 고등학교, which is a prestigious high school, before a corrupt teacher, Chun Sang-yeol, manipulated her records. I still highlight that great teachers do their best to teach students regardless, and that some students, particularly from underrepresented economic background, need the support of public education and government-sponsored e-learning programs to catch up. Yet, unfortunately, it will be interesting to know the social cultural factor in appreciating K-drama or K-culture when K-12 students are the main character of the series. Counselor Joseph, by this point, do you have preferred treatment options for people like Hanyeri and others?
Yeah, building on our discussion of Hanyeri and our potential ODD diagnosis, treatment strategies must directly target the precipitating events. Because her condition appears rooted in perceived betrayal, corruption, and manipulation, therapy should address the cognitive distortion of overgeneralization. Specifically, allowing her to restructure the thought that a single negative betrayal does not dictate future outcomes. In tandem with this cognitive restructuring, clinicians must address the emotional patterns, primarily chronic anxiety and anger in this case, that continually signal to Hanyeri that her traumatic memory is bound to repeat itself with every single trigger or reminder. This is a common human response to trauma called hypervigilance. Other classic post-traumatic symptoms include intrusive re-experiencing, such as persistent cognitions, nightmares, or flashbacks, avoidance of specific triggers, and heightened emotional arousal. Typically, these symptoms naturally subside within 3 days to a month. This recovery happens because the brain processes traumatic experiences primarily during dreaming. The prevailing consensus is that dreaming transfers daily experiences stored in the hippocampus, often called the brain's junk drawer, and integrates them with past memories stored in the cortex. When processed successfully, we wake without conscious memory of the dreams. For Hanyeri, however, it is likely that emotional arousal wakes her from recurring nightmares featuring perpetrators of the trauma or events that resemble the trauma, so that the brain can finish processing the emotional material. For a vulnerable subset of individuals, these trauma symptoms persist indefinitely, a trajectory Hanyeri clearly mirrors. From an evolutionary standpoint, in the caveman days, so to speak, when a threat or enemy startles us, our brain actually sees the physical escape or fighting back as the way to resolve the danger. So, traumatic memory is balanced by the resolution memory. Modern society, however, rarely allows for such direct physical resolution, leaving individuals trapped in close proximity to perpetrators or constant reminders of past trauma. Unresolved trauma carries a severe risk of compounding into broader psychological diagnoses. According to Dr. Janina Fisher's research, while trauma does not guarantee a specific diagnosis, it heavily contributes to the development of generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, substance use issues, behavioral challenges like ODD, and virtually all personality disorders. Now, let's talk about the term personality disorder for a minute here. It's somewhat of a misnomer. Early researchers labeled these conditions as such under the assumption that personalities are fixed and unchanging. In reality, human personality adapts and evolves as our circumstances and support systems change. More accurate descriptors for these patterns are treatment resistant or recurring. Clinically, personality disorders are categorized into three distinct clusters. Cluster A is characterized by eccentric, odd behaviors, social detachment, mistrust, and unconventional thought patterns. Cluster C is characterized by anxious or fearful behaviors, and Cluster B is perhaps the most widely recognized, featuring dramatic emotional or erratic presentations marked by several difficulties with impulse control, emotional regulation, and interpersonal difficulties. Cluster B encompasses four specific conditions: antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic personality disorder. Now, Hanyeri's symptoms align closely with the Cluster B presentation. Because these personality dynamics are treatment resistant, once again, they do not resolve through standard talk therapy or psychotropic medications alone. While medication may manage specific co occurring symptoms, no single pharmacological treatment cures the underlying structure. Depending on how her behavior evolves, aspects of several cluster B disorders surface. If her opposition to authority hardens into wanton cruelty toward others, antisocial personality disorder might be in her future. Another danger is narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. If her current sense of entitlement escalates into grandiosity, that is, believing she is undeniably superior, a profound lack of empathy for others, for example, dismissing others as too sensitive, and constant blame shifting, like claiming, "You made me feel this way." Ironically, while many individuals with NPD secretly grapple with a pervasive sense of inadequacy and shame, those lacking objective self awareness remain entirely trapped within a false self, genuinely believing their own lies of superiority. Unlikely, but borderline personality disorder, or BPD, could be in our future too. BPD shares similarities with NPD in producing dramatic and erratic relationships. However, a BPD profile's intense anger stems primarily from perceived abandonment and a deeply negative self image rather than wounded grandiosity. Histrionic personality disorder is, in my opinion, a strong potential trajectory if Hanyeri's behavior becomes increasingly dramatic, marked by attention seeking through appearances or flirtations, exaggerated emotional displays, or somatic complaints. Ultimately, traumatic experiences, genetic predispositions, and neurological factors all intertwine. When problematic thinking, emotional dysregulation, and behavioral patterns are left untreated, and when individuals mistakenly believe that a quick fix pills or strict punishments will resolve deep-seated issues, trauma frequently solidifies into treatment resistant personality pathologies. Accounting for all underlying factors in a comprehensive treatment plan and seeking professional intervention as early as possible remains the surest path to long term therapeutic progress.
I didn't realize the complexity of identifying and categorizing
Mm-hmm.
behaviors, determining the most appropriate interventions for individuals who are struggling, and guiding their families and friends in providing meaningful support rather than repeating simplistic responses such as things will get better or dismissing the person as difficult. And thank you, Counselor Joseph. In understanding the main character like Teacher Chong, I am reminded of the importance of teacher professionalism. So, for example, 교권고, Teachers' Right Protection Agency's intervention is provisional in that the direction of reshaping education and teacher professionalism should be from the basic principles of how relationships among teachers, students, and families should be. Additionally, teacher professionalism is directly connected with sustainable policy, that teachers has autonomy in decision making, particularly interacting with the students and families with proper authority. Well, I mean by abiding policy and principles fairly, not controlled by external forces or parents' unreasonable requests like favoritism, sometimes with bribes or sometimes with threats. To better understand this Netflix series, I'd like to provide some historical background on Teach Your Lesson. I think that it will be helpful for the viewers as well. In the 2010s, a student human rights ordinance was launched across Korea's major provinces like Seoul and Gyeonggi for the purpose of protecting students' rights with human dignity. The culture of treating students as objects was problematized and listed outstanding concerns such as corporal punishment, hair length, night study sessions, and no discrimination due to any cultural identities. So, for example, as part of hair length regulations, boys were required to keep very short hair, usually not longer than 1 inch, and girls had certain regulations on hair length, and perms or dyeing hair were not allowed. Due to the culture of competition, not only on individual level but as a school level, night study sessions were held at school. So, for example, students they are they stay in school on a regular school hours around 4:30, and they still study as the format of self-study in the school building until 10 to 11 p.m. So this human rights, student right issues was how to stop this kind of practices. So Teach Your Lesson emphasizes the prohibition of corporal punishment as one of the causes of losing a teacher's authority, yet it is dramatized in this K-drama. The center of argument is the true meaning of education when hyper-competitive and ranking-oriented culture diminish teacher authority, heavy reliance on shadow education in Hagwon, and learned helplessness among students and teachers in handling stress, low self-esteem of perpetual failure, early determination on career based on standardized test scores such as Korea's SAT, and ultimately the creation of bulldozer parenting for the sake of college entrance and thus condescend teachers like Ujin Mom in episode 5. It is not a coincidence that episode 8 addresses drug issues among high school students to increase test scores to enter medical school. In Korea, students enter medical school as an undergraduate program. For example, in 2005, like the U.S. medical education structure, the government made um, the Korean government made pre-med for undergraduate and medical school for graduate programs. Within 5 years, graduate school-based medical education was removed, although few institutions kept it. So if you watch the whole 10 episodes of Teach Your Lesson, it is an issue of hyper-competition drugs and illegal aggressive acts initiated by parents for surviving and winning the competition and
Mm.
sustaining privilege and social promotion via college entrance. So, Counselor Joseph, today we shared our perspectives on episode 3 from a counseling perspective and provided social cultural context in Korea, whereas tragedies recur as with Teacher Ko, Teacher Chung, and Yeri.
Yeah. And next time, we analyze episode 1 of Teach You a Lesson to present differing views on privilege and citizens' consensus in shaping people's lives. I will talk more about the personality disorders, I hope.
I will introduce specific examples on how Korean citizens put efforts for equal access to education and resources appears in Teach Your Lesson series, particularly in episode 1.
Thank you for listening.